We are Rogue Media Sports.
Have you ever brought your magic to Walt Disney World like, hey, we came to play? Did you tip your tiara to a Creole princess or get goofy officially? When we come through, it's true magic, because we came to play at Walt Disney World Resort.
Dogs are an important part of our lives, and keeping them protected is a top priority, especially against nasty parasites. That's why you gotta check out NexGard Plus, afoxolaner, moxidectin, and pyrantel chewable tablets. NexGard Plus chews provide one-and-done monthly protection that kills fleas and ticks, prevents heartworm disease. Plus, it treats and controls roundworms and hookworms. That's a whole lot of protection packed into a delicious beef-flavored, soft chew designed to make monthly dosing easy and enjoyable. So the next time you're at the vet, ask about NexGard Plus chews. They're the one-and-done monthly parasite protection you want for your dog. Use with caution in dogs with a history of seizures or neurologic disorders. Dogs should be tested for existing heartworm infection prior to starting a preventive.
It is the Doomsday Podcast. Werder and Matt Mosley, we have, you heard us in the aftermath of the opening press conference out there. We had a Doomsday episode. I believe that was this past Tuesday. Ed and I, as of Sunday, have both made it back into the Metroplex. And Ed, it is it's pretty halting when you come back into this heat, especially when we were dealing with about 72 degrees each day. We had a really good run. We had some good things happen to us. And Ed, we're going to get right to it today. We because of you, got Dan Quinn and really got some great time, a one-on-one, a Doomsday exclusive, so to speak. And Ed, I think it was really important for this to happen, and for a lot of reasons. But one is Dan Quinn is an enormous figure at this camp and heading into this season. And such a big part of that is because Dan Quinn, it looked like he was probably going to get another job. He had 6 interviews, and yet he ends up staying with the Cowboys, which could have made things a little awkward with Mike McCarthy, because Mike McCarthy had been kind of hanging out there in the wind. And Ed, as we'll sort of get into in this conversation, it was kind of, I think what Jerry ended up revealing is that part of the reason Mike was out there hanging in the wind was because of Dan Quinn.
Yeah, Jerry says he wanted these teams that were interested in pursuing Dan Quinn for their vacant head coaching jobs to believe that it was possible that Jerry Jones coveted what Quinn had done last year so much, and he was so disappointed in that loss at home to the 49ers that he was prepared or considering firing Mike McCarthy and promoting Dan Quinn into the head coaching job, and that might cause some teams to just look at it that way and move on and find their next best candidate and stay away from the coveted Dan Quinn. I have since talked to some people in the organization after we did this interview, and I was told that the competition that the Cowboys faced for Dan Quinn was fierce. Now, we know Jerry Jones has said that, like some other coordinators the Cowboys have had in the past, Quinn actually turned down head coaching offers to remain with the Cowboys. What we don't know, and it'll be interesting to see when and if this gets revealed at some point. I asked Quinn directly about it in our interview. What we don't know is, what did Jerry Jones do to the contract? We know he extended Dan Quinn's contract to satisfy him, but Dan Quinn had a lot of leverage here. And I think the most interesting part of that contract would be to know not just how much he's making and how long he's technically committed to the Cowboys, but how is the potential of a head coaching change in the future addressed? And is Quinn in any way promised that if it happens in a certain span of time, that he would get the head coaching job of the Cowboys should they move on from Mike McCarthy.
Yeah, this would be a weird head coaching waiting because they're of similar age and experience in the NFL. Obviously, Mike McCarthy had a lot longer period of time and won a Super Bowl with Green Bay, but they are of similar age and contemporaries, so that would be interesting.
I think it's worth pointing out that both Jerry and Stephen Jones give Mike McCarthy credit for being the one to identify the value of Dan Quinn as a defensive coordinator and bringing him in after having to fire Mike Nolan, who was a personal friend of Mike McCarthy's, after just one season, the pandemic shortened season in which the Cowboys allowed a franchise, record number of points under Nolan, and then moved on to Dan Quinn. And the other part of it is McCarthy was asked after his press conference yesterday about the Quinn situation afterward, and maybe he didn't know everything that happened, and was it at all, and it created any kind of oddness in their relationship. And McCarthy laughed it off and said, "Hey, we're two Irish guys over 50. We can handle this kind of thing just fine." And he also mentioned that Quinn was at the 49ers as a defensive coach on the defensive side of the ball before McCarthy worked for the 49ers, and that they were somewhat close together their tenures, and there's always an appreciation in that regard from one staff to the one that's preceded it, because they get a sense of from the players what kind of coaching staff they had before, what kind of philosophy that they use, and so forth. So McCarthy says he's always had a high opinion of Dan Quinn, and as you might expect, he says he doesn't have any problem with Quinn being on the staff now, and I believe that. Now, I would also point out that sometimes guys know how to survive. And, Larry Lacewell was one of those guys, a former front office scouting director under Bill Parcells and several others. And when Jerry was bringing Barry Switzer in, he knew there was a schism between the two dating back to their time together at the University of Oklahoma. And Jerry, before he announced the Switzer hire, asked Larry Lacewell, "Is this going to be a problem for you?" And Lacewell, recognizing that if he said yes, the solution was going to be, "Well, then you're fired and Barry's coming in," he just said, "No, it won't be a problem for me." And so sometimes that happens. Like a guy recognizes where it's all going, and so he just says, "Okay, I'll be fine with it." And I'm not saying that's what happened here. I don't think that's what happened here, for the record. But it's just interesting how sometimes people will adjust when forced to do so.
All right, so 3 days into camp, while Ed and I were in Oxnard, California, and they were having kind of an interesting little evening practice, kind of a walkthrough type thing. Ed and I were poised and ready, and Dan Quinn walked over post-practice. We found a nice little tent area with some nice table. Ed and I surrounded him, and this is the interview that we did.
Now joining the Doomsday Podcast, defensive coordinator Dan Quinn transformed the Cowboys defense in a single season, inherited a defense that allowed the most points in franchise history, 473, under Mike Nolan, to one that ranked among the most formidable in the league and was often the reason the Cowboys won as much as they did, despite all the money Jerry pays on offense. In his first season calling the defense, Dallas led the NFL with 6 defensive touchdowns, 33 takeaways, and 25 interceptions, while recording 31 sacks and placing 7th in the NFL in points allowed at just 20.5 per game. Now, here's my first question to you, Dan Quinn. We thank you for joining us, first of all, at the end of this hard practice day out here in Oxnard, as Jerry calls it. So, with the success you had last year and the success you've had as a head coach previously, there was obviously a lot of interest in you from teams that were looking to hire head coaches. So how do you interview for 6 head coaching jobs and wind up back here in the same capacity with the Dallas Cowboys?
I think it's an easy question. And quite honestly, I don't think I could see anybody else coaching this defense. I was so ready to be a part. We had so many guys that were here and coming back. And quite honestly, my last year, really year and a half, probably Atlanta was tough. And so recapturing the fun of it and being a part of it here, honestly, I really had a blast. And so I just didn't want to miss that. And so I really enjoy working with Mike. I enjoy kind of the personnel side with Will and Steven and Jerry. So like for me, it was not as hard as it may seem. I was interested at the time, and right when you get done the season, things happen quickly, and you know what? You take a step back. You said, I'm happy as hell here, and I'm really enjoying it. I was getting to coach and do the things and make an impact, in that way. And so I was just like, every once in a while, the stuff lines up that you enjoy it, and maybe there's another time where that'll light me up in a way, but it wasn't yet. And I was absolutely enjoying it, and I really recaptured my joy of coaching. And I don't want to mess with that mojo. And like I said, I couldn't think of anybody else. Like, I thought we were going to be pretty good, coming up this year on defense. I don't want to see anybody. I want to see you taking over, Ed, and calling it. I was like, this is going to be a fun group to coach. I think we're going with Micah and Trey and Jay Ron and Malik. We have Dono and safeties packages. We got rushers we've added, and so it's been a fun off season of integrating Sam and Dante into this group. So long story to answer your question, but really at the end of it, man, I'm really happy doing what I'm doing here. And I think had I not been a head coach before, you go running and sprinting to that. But this gave me probably some perspective to say, man, I'm really enjoying it here and being a part of it. And so when it's taken away from you and you miss it so bad as I did, and you find the happiness that you're looking for, you kind of want to hold on to that.
At the same time, you're a smart businessman, and Jerry Jones, you had some leverage against Jerry Jones because he desperately wanted to keep you. And so much so that he says, I don't know if this is true or not, but he says that the reason he didn't immediately endorse Mike McCarthy's return as a head coach is he wanted teams to think that you might become the head coach here to increase the chances of you staying here. So, but beyond that, Jerry did say he extended your contract. Can you give us some sense of what kind of commitment he made to you to demonstrate how much he wanted you here?
Yeah, I think it's, like kind of being part of the whole thing. Like, this is a competitor's environment. Like I said, I really enjoy working with Mike. We had known each other, but, more from a distance as, whether I was a D coordinator early on or a head coach to head coach. And so coming here and being around him, and then the second, fast I said personnel, and then with Jerry and Steven getting to, spend the year with them and being around it, it just felt right for me to stay in a supportive role to everybody. And so when we talked about that, it was something I was interested in. We both were. So it was, pretty easy to, say, okay, this is what I wanted to do, and they wanted that together. That's usually what's pretty easy to work some things out to go and go from there.
I'm sure Jerry's going to hate how you just gave me all the specific details of the contract like I asked for.
He's ways better at that side of things than me. So he said, I'm a good businessman. I don't know about that. I love coaching, but the business side of it, usually I leave that to somebody else.
I think it could have been a little awkward with Mike, and he's even admitted that. He was kind of waiting to see what's going to happen with him. You're out there interviewing, and then at some point I remember him saying that he sat down and kind of had a talk with you.
Yeah.
How did y'all kind of clear that to make sure moving forward? Obviously, you had a great relationship, but that none of this was going to be awkward moving forward.
You even said, do I need to leave?
I did. I was the one that went to him. So I didn't want him ever to feel uncomfortable. Like Mike was the one that brought me here. So I didn't want him in any space to feel uncomfortable. I wanted to be and see around the corners and be supportive of him. I know that was for a guy like Raheem Morris for me, to help and be there and maybe have some perspective of being in that chair to say, hey, go talk and think about this and behind the scenes. So I just wanted to be supportive of him and say, hey, I know what that seat can be like sometimes, and I wanted to make sure I could support him. So if it makes it easier, I'll go after and go. And he said, that was good. He said, it was probably some years ago I would have said, yeah, get your ass out of here. But I think he knew that, certainly for me, coming, at him with the, look around and give him support and as best that I can. And so I think he knew that for me. That's, the only thing I'm coming from. So it wasn't as difficult a conversation, and it's never anything more than that. So that's how we go.
So most people, I believe, would say, well, you're going into year 2 of your system. Players should be able to perform even better with all the reps and game success they've had. But when you look at what you did last year, how can you possibly think you're going to have a bigger impact on your team defensively than you did?
I think, and that is how I do think that, where as you're going a whole nother year into a system, think about any job we had when we first took it on, there were some new things to learn. And quite honestly, I had been running the same system for 8 years. And so when we changed quite a bit of the package, there was some learning that went on for me too. And so I had to come to, okay, I like this part better. I like what I did in the old way a little better. So I had a little bit of back and forth to go through. And then this spring, I thought there were some breakthroughs on the teaching side because they had been in it. So I wasn't just going to, rinse and repeat. This is this. This is this. We really taught big concepts and had players teach some and be involved in that. And so I'm hopeful as we're heading into, the practices, you hear sharper, faster communication and where you can almost unconsciously go faster because of that knowledge of the system. And the faster we play, the more aggressive we play. A lot of that has to do with real knowledge of it. And so I'm one that's always been a stickler for the communication of it. That's usually what I'm looking for first, to hear.
Because if that fails, it's a bad thing.
Yeah, so I want to hear pre-snap communication, post-snap communication. And now that we're adding some guys into it, they need the most reps. But we're improving in that area through the off season into now. And that to me is system expertise. There's about some goals I wanted to hit over the 25 days before we got back to Dallas. I thought we can get a hell of a lot done here in 25 days from yesterday. I think we go back after like the Charger games. I was like August 20th or something. So I said, okay, in the next 25 days, I think we can make big strides and really push ourselves to see how good we can get.
Now, I haven't seen you put a helmet on yet or anything. I did see you line up and come off the edge. I mean, isn't that one of the things you love about training camp?
Yes, only in the walkthroughs for me.
Last you did it before the New England game.
So it was it's fun to teach, and for me coming up, like that was what I wanted to do. So I went to college, become a elementary school teacher, and teach and coach, and that part has never really left me, the teaching. And so whether it's on field, in the classroom, I love the engagement back and forth with the guys. And so sometimes the hands-on coaching for players who are physical learners is more valuable than the classroom work for some players. So grabbing, moving, this is going to happen. That can help a learner who may not be as strong in the classroom, but you put them in their environment, seeing, feeling, going, it helps. And that's what I try to do, to push that whenever I can.
You almost have to be more creative in the teaching because of the CBA and not as many padded practices, more
as many preseason games.
Yeah, and I think that's like if there's a way to find a competitive edge, I think that's a cool thing to do, to say the easy thing to do is bitch about, we don't have this, we don't have that. Well, we all got the same guidelines, so how can we max out that time to get people really up to speed quickly? And there's this, it's interesting because you guys know, like the college game and how fast they play is so much different than our game, like on the ball, where they're not seeing pre-snap tips and stuff, where we just go, and see it. They don't get to analyze formations and matchups of people, where in the NFL we're pretty selective where we try to put people. And so the new players, to put them into roles to see what they can do, has been a fun part for me and for them to say, like, here over these next 25 days, I want to see who can guard tight ends. Can he play end-to-end tackle? Can the corner play nickel? Can the safety play linebacker? Because in college, you didn't do that. You just, you were into your space and go. They played over 100 plays a game, where ours is different. And so there's some real technical part, but it might have been the case, like say you were a safety and we tried you, guarding, a tight end. That's not his deal, but man, can he blitz? So finding out about some of these guys is a really important piece to it. And I'd rather stress them and say, okay, time to back out. And that was my challenge last year with Parsons, to make sure I had the right amount without going over where he had to think it through too much. And he could have continued to call the plays on our green dot microphone. But after there was a practice, I might have been in a game in New England, he was playing defensive end and trying to make the call. And I said to myself, that's my fault. And so after that, in fact, I knew it was coming because it felt busy. And so during practice, maybe a week or two before New Orleans, I gave it to JK. I said, I don't want you to do anything. I just want you to hear what this sounds like. And so I may come to you in a week and say, I'm going to change this job. I didn't ask him, hey, do you think you can do it? I said, I don't even want anybody to know that you have it on from practice. You can't do it in the game. And so after that New England week, I said, you ready to give this a go? He said, yeah, I am. And so that took one less thing off of Micah, but that was kind of a small example of sometimes you can give somebody too much, even when they're prideful. I can handle it. I can do it.
Didn't want to disappoint anybody.
Yeah, and it was like, no, man, you're good. Like, this is not me coming at you from a spot of you're not handling this. This is me coming back like, I don't want to take away from that job because you're trying to talk back here. And so that's what I try to find out in this time, to say, what can, a Bell handle? What can Sam handle? What can Bland handle? The newer players, what can Fowler handle? So I stress them and then find out that sweet spot of the things that they do best. And it takes a little while to get there, like it's not like 1 week or 1 day. You say, okay, he can do that and this. Like, you got to go through it. You got to get beat and hear it practice and then like get pissed or like, okay, can we fix that? No, then we won't do that with you.
So you mentioned Micah Parsons, and one of the big things I think for success on defense, especially when you're playing a guy like Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers, as you will this year, is, defensive disguise, pre-snap disguise. How much does Micah and his versatility allow you to just do that in a very easy way? Yeah,
because some of the jobs, although we are lining them at different positions, we can say, hey, this is just like, this is the same drop that you would take at linebacker that you would here at defensive end. So those are some things that under the disguise you nailed it, because that was one of the things looking back, over my 360 of all the Seattle and Atlanta defense. Say, okay, what was good then that needs to change now? And part of that was also disguise, to make sure, can we just make it wait another click? And so we worked hard at that, where in the past we might have not put disguising as much in, but it started yesterday, very first day, to say these are the 2 disguises for today, and I did another one tonight, so we can make one thing try to look like something it's not, and then on the snap to change it. So I've started doing that earlier than I had before.
So, and you talk about guys taking second-year jumps. What can your expectations of Micah Parsons be, given what he did last year? You
know what? I think he's ready for the challenges to do things that, like, we play him in different spots, and that's a challenge in itself, to say he's linebacker, he's defensive end. We put him into different alignments. So during the off-season, how do we tailor meetings? Hey, sometimes you're with the defensive end, sometimes you're with the linebacker. So having a very clear plan of how to best, use his teaching, that's one of the things. As far as performance-wise, we just try to feature him in the ways of the things that he does best, and so that's whether it's blitzing or rushing. And he's got his own goals, he wants to work on too. Like, I want some intercepts. So, like, you have no intercepts. You don't have any hands, He said, that's not true, So he thinks he does. So it's like, all right, well, let's see if that happens, But right now you have none, So it's like low-hanging fruit, So he's such a competitor. I would say Big Azua is one that I think is, primed for a second-year jump as an interior rusher. So he's another one. Joseph, like we were just talking about it last night. So, man, what a difference a year makes. You know what to expect at a training camp, and just how to organize your day, how to organize your practice time, to get ready. And so 1 to 2 is the biggest, but 2 to 3, I've had guys make big jumps too. Like it just took time to get going. So I'm thinking Gallimore, he missed a lot. He's somebody I have high hopes for to get some production. So that's another one.
What about Joseph? You brought him up. Just what are reasonable or realistic expectations for someone like this? That last year, obviously, it didn't really break
you got to
through.
give credit to other players too. For Diggs and Brown and Lewis. It was a pretty connected group, so it was hard to, get more playing time into that. So as much as it could have been seen as a function towards Kelvin, it was also a pretty good example of Anthony Brown and Trayvon and Jordan having pretty rock-solid performances that were hard to top that consistency. One of the things I've seen from him and Nahshon Wright as this, just their footwork, their line of scrimmage play has been really strong through the off-season and as are starting into camp. Wright is a lot bigger than he used to be. He's probably 12 pounds or more heavier. He's 6'3", and I think he came in the 80s, and he's close to 200 pounds now. So now you're talking about a guy with 6'3", who's almost 200 pounds. He can play long, and Kelvin's always had very good strength at the line. Like he's, not an undersized corner. So I would say that's, the fun challenge for me, finding more packages and more ways to feature them. But both of them have come into camp and have impressed so far, and it's a good position to have depth at corner, at rusher, and so all of those guys I see playing.
Did you try to be available to Kelvin with what he was going through off the field? Because that had to be a lot to be thinking about and dealing with.
First thing you want to make, hey, how are we doing from the neck up? It's not always easy to have your name in media when the story isn't known, and that alone can take a toll on you mentally, So, that was one of the first things, I want to make sure, is he okay? Where's he at in the mental space? Because it's a difficult process, for anybody to go through when your name's out there and the story, whatever. I'm not trying to get ahead. I'm trying to say when your name's out there for something that's non-football related,
and you can't really speak to
and it can take an emotional toll on you. Thanks, Ed, for helping me clarify. But that's a thing that for any, let alone our age, but somebody that's younger to have to go through and battle through, not as easy. But at the end of it, you want to make sure that the person, before the player.
You mentioned Trayvon Diggs, 11 interceptions, but also allowed the most yards after the catch.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you watch tape or watch him at a game, he's reluctant to get involved in the run game or making a tackle when his receiver catches the ball on him. What are the things you think you can do with him in year 2 where he can become a more consistent overall
and I
player?
think you see in him he's got really high standards of how he wants to play too. So whether that's matching up onto somebody, we'll do that. But the movement stuff to go, because he's got fantastic ball skills. He works hard at that spot, but he's working just as hard, on the techniques. Him, like we talked about Joseph, those guys with Al Harris. He's just such an excellent technician. Al is, for these guys to learn from. And you see him stand up in the meeting room. Let's talk about our footwork here, the smallest of details that Al can go with on those guys. Because outside, there's not all the scheme that goes along with playing safety or linebacker. It's the movements on this player. Where's it going? How does he go? Where's your hands and feet connected? So they spend a lot of time on the movement of playing corner, not all the different coverages. And Al certainly, if you were coming up wanting to play corner, he's the right person to help you develop. And so that's what's kind of cool to say he's, the only guy Trey had, the only guy Kelvin had, Nashawn. So some of these guys have played very well under his tutelage, development, mentoring, and I see those, I think that would be, we talked about 1 to 2 jump. I think he can also be one that has a 2 to 3 jump, year 2 to year 3.
That'd be pretty remarkable.
Because it's not only, you can't just gauge him on just the interceptions. Right. That's not the only way I would say that he had a successful year. There's going to be other metrics that are going to come into play for that.
Not to take any credit away from you, but the instinctual things that he does, it's just kind of uncanny. And when somebody has the ability to bait people into things, I mean, even for you who've watched a lot of incredible people, are you sometimes amazed at when you look back and
I think it's the ability to track the ball and running full speed and just catch the tip or a flash of a ball and be able to backhand this way to go. He's got excellent length, but there's a lot of people who have 33-inch arms. It's his ball skills in the air that are the separator to me. When it's in the air, that's mine. It's not, I'm coming to try to knock it down. That was in the air for me, and he wants to go get it.
Could he be like Dion and play both ways?
That's a good question. No. But yeah, he could.
You don't want him to? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, of course he couldn't. But I would imagine there's some, certain routes that I would bet he would be exceptional at based on what he's done. We've got a pretty good crew. But I would say he did it in major college football early, in his career before he moved over. So I would say yes he could, but no he can't. Yes he could, but no he won't. How about that? Yeah.
Here's my last thing because I know you got to get going. We've kept you here quite a while, but. In terms of people you lost, Randy Gregory, guy that you really believed in.
Yep, I do. I love him.
And so that had to hurt on an emotional level beyond, because you helped make him what he was. And you believed in him the second you got here, that he was going to be one of the few guys that Jerry took a big risk on, who really hit it big, and he did. He got a big contract in Denver.
Yep.
So, how do you go about replacing him? Can DeMarcus Lawrence do a lot more? I mean, he missed a lot of games last year. Is that where it comes from?
It'll be interesting. We won't replace Randy. So he had unique things that said, okay, we can do this with him, and let's do that. So we'll find different things that other guys will do, but there won't be one guy to say, hey, let's do this.
That's a different
like
role.
Randy would, because that's a different role. So, but there's some things that some of the guys here would do that he wouldn't have done. Does that make sense? So I won't rinse and repeat. You are now the Randy Gregory position and go. It's not like quarterback to say, because when I found out so much more how strong Randy was, okay, we can move him inside some. I wouldn't have thought that, before being like with him, because when I worked him out years ago at Nebraska, that was not the case.
Skinny guy.
He was skinny, came out playing hacky sack. I'm like, nah, he's going to be outside only, So then I saw like grown up version, I was like, okay, we're going to have some, just like this last year at training camp. I'd like you to go, I know you haven't done this, but I'd like you to try this technique from standing up and
let's see it again.
Yeah. And okay.
And that worked.
Yeah. And I said, okay, I'll do that. And so I'm doing some of those things with other players, but not necessarily like, hey, this is what Randy did or that. And so I respect the guy a lot, and I keep up with the person, and text, just check it in, make sure they're doing good. Usually, if I've coached a guy, I'll try to stay connected, as long as I can, and he's certainly somebody that I'll do that with. But I suppose what you bring up, like who will play that roles, no one will play that role, but we'll have things to feature the guys, the things that they do best. And will it look like Randy's role at times? Sometimes. Positions or alignments.
This is your last question, too, by the way.
Ed, you're not in control of this. In control of me. When fans react to like Randy Gregory thing, and there was a lot of backlash on the Cowboys for the way that thing went down. For a coach and someone who's that close to him and that invested, when that news breaks, do you have to just kind of go, hey, this is the business, or is there almost like a grieving type period?
I think,
what's that like?
You can have disappointment, but there's still, he's still the man, the person, So I may have the disappointment that he's not here or he wasn't there, but that happens, So you have to be able to separate that and not harden your heart to anything, So I understand fans' reactions and stuff, but at the end of it, sometimes what seems like the right fit isn't, and so you just, when it's out of your control, then you really just let go of the outcome of how it was going to go and just support, our side, his side, and that's kind of how I've approached it.
Well, we appreciate it. This has been Dan Quinn's Tell-All on the Doomsday Podcast. Thank you, Dan.
Hey, thanks for your time, DQ, as always, and good luck doing better than you did last year. I appreciate it.
We're going to give it our best.
All right, and there it was, Ed. That was I really liked the conversation, and Ed, we should note that is the first time Dan Quinn has given an interview since the season ended, since the Cowboys season ended. We all know how it ended. We all know he was in the news a lot because he was interviewing so much, and he had 6 interviews. I think he turned down the opportunity to interview with Jacksonville after that whole mess was going on there. And so Ed, kudos to you. You've known Dan for a while and had a really good relationship with him, and we appreciate that. It is not, he's not doing a whole lot of these, and so we appreciate it. And Ed, there was some really good stuff that came out of there. I was struck. Even when he talked about some of the 3 safety package, some of the cornerbacks. I mean, later we'll get to hear a little bit more from Jaron Kearse. But, Ed, I think we forget sometimes. I mean, they've created some depth in the secondary. Dan Quinn was known for that incredible secondary with the Seattle Seahawks. And I just was I thought even some of the stuff we talked to him about involving Kelvin Joseph and his tumultuous offseason and sort of his expectations for Kelvin Joseph, it does seem like Dan Quinn is pretty excited about the depth, especially at defensive back.
Well, I love that. Yeah, you're talking about the Legion of Boom years in Seattle when Seattle went to back-to-back Super Bowls and beat Peyton Manning one year and lost to Tom Brady in the next because of the controversial, Russell Wilson, Malcolm Butler interception play at the goal line late in the game, or else they would have beat both of those Hall of Fame quarterbacks in consecutive Super Bowls. And Dan Quinn was the architect of a lot of the success Seattle had on defense during Pete Carroll's great years up there. And to his credit, when he was fired by the Falcons as the head coach and sat out and, missed football, but then began, like McCarthy, He didn't go to the barn in Green Bay, but he did go through this period of self-examination that he described, and he was smart enough coming out of it to say, hey, maybe I do need to modify some things. Maybe there are some philosophical changes I need to make in the way I coach defense, given what the league has become now. And he didn't go right back to the Seattle, the 3 deep zones and no disguise. Now he's all about being exotic and using disguise pre-snap with these, to defend against these great quarterbacks. And I think the thing that he touched on that he does so great is he finds what guys can do, however many things it is. And with a young guy, it might not be a big role, but he finds out what they're capable of, and he only uses them in those situations where it's favorable to the player. So the player goes on the field maybe 30% of the time as a substitute in a nickel or a dime package, but he knows this is where I can succeed. I'm going to succeed in this situation. I'm not going to be exposed by my coaching staff very often. And so I think he's brilliant in that. And that's why I think you can believe that he'll find some collection of players and he'll be able to replace Randy Gregory like he suggested. And he'll be able to find Jaron Kearse, who was a journeyman player for 6 years in the NFL before he came to Dallas last year, and in his first year led the team in tackles. But I thought the most entertaining parts of the conversation were when he talked about Micah Parsons and, hey, he wants to have interceptions, but he only doesn't have any because he has bad hands. But I thought that was really a humorous anecdote that really gives you a sense of the relationship he has with players. And I thought maybe the best thing was to come out of it was you asking him about Trayvon Diggs and playing wide receiver and being a Dion type of player, and the fact that he's capable of it, but I'm not letting that happen. I thought those were kind of the highlight moments, and I wanted to really accentuate the changes that Dan made to create the success that he had last year. And now he's really up against it. So like everybody expects, as we said, them to. You would think, hey, in year 2 you should be that much better. The players know the scheme. You know the players. You've got better players. You've upgraded your personnel now 2 years in a row. Had a second draft class specific for your defense. But, wow, they were so great on defense last year. It's unimaginable to me that they could produce those kind of statistics again.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Jaron Kearse. We'll get to hear from Jaron here in a little bit. And, Ed, that was a funny one. I kind of had a little Jaron. I got him off the side, and you saw me across the field over there and arrived, and we kind of got a double team there and got Jaron Kearse. The interviews were done a little differently, but as the week evolved, things kind of relaxed, and we found our footing and did our usual thing. But even Dan, when he kind of let us in behind the curtain a little bit as to how he eased, and Jaron Kearse, I think I brought it up with him about, giving Jaron, or I actually we talked to Jaron about it, about giving him that responsibility of calling the plays, being the one to wear the helmet mic or the to hear the call come in.
And get
correct.
The call, yeah.
And I thought Dan Quinn had some interesting the background of how that came about, how he kind of chose Jaron Kearse, and how that ended up working so smoothly. I think that gives you some insight into how this guy thinks and how he's willing to change and not do things just, hey, this is the position that's supposed to call out the play. I think he adapts, and I think that's a big part of who he is.
Well, I think he realized, from a logistical standpoint, that it didn't really make sense to have Micah Parsons, a rookie, first of all, who's already playing a variety of different positions in his first year in the NFL. It didn't make a lot of sense if he's going to be on the defensive line trying to anticipate the snap count, watch the ball, and try and see who's going to block him. It doesn't make sense for him then to be turning around before the ball snapped and tell everybody else what the coverage needs to be or what adjustment they need to make. It makes a lot more sense for the guy deepest in the secondary to do it. And the fact that it was a process of a couple of weeks, right? He did this very subtly, didn't want to, make Micah Parsons feel like, oh, he was inadequate and incapable of doing this. This was a move being done to make him more productive. And at the same time, he didn't put it all on Jaron Kearse that, hey, I need you to do this right now. It was, hey, wear the helmet this weekend. Let's see how this goes. See how you feel about this before you ever even broach the subject of possibly making a change. Really smart the way he made that kind of adjustment. And I think that comes out in a lot of different ways.
All right. Well, about 24 minutes with Dan Quinn is what we got. And very appreciative of that. Great work by Ed, kind of nailing that down. And we're just able to glad to be able to bring that to you. And again, Ed, going back to Curse, and we'll hear from him here in a minute, but I was looking at some of these names. One of the things McCarthy brought up, I thought, and you made this point when the two of us were just talking offline, our many dinners we had together at Lure, and just some of the nice things that we were able to do together as we made our way around.
Drinks at Winchester's.
Yeah.
Fish sandwiches at Andrea's.
Yeah,
okay, go ahead.
All those things were nice. But McCarthy was relaxed and kind of funny, and I think somewhat open in our conversations with him. And in fact, in the past, I don't think he's done the whole walk-off interview that we used to do a lot with Parcells and even some with Garrett. And McCarthy was seemingly enjoying that. I thought one of the moments talking about the DBs made me think about this. He said to the media, I don't think you guys are maybe giving Anthony Brown enough love. And I thought, first of all, it's just weird to see all these single-digit guys. You got Jordan Lewis is 2, Anthony Brown is 3, Trayvon Diggs is 7, Donovan Wilson is 6. I mean, it's just a bunch of DBs, and they're all single-digit guys. But I mean, I guess we think of Trayvon Diggs being big time. Curse had a really nice year, but we think more of Parsons and other parts of this team. I don't know that I came into this camp thinking, well, they're going to be really strong in the secondary. I think even just after a few days out there, I have a little bit better feel for the secondary. And, oh, by the way, there's an undrafted free agent that they can't stop talking about. I usually don't, want to buy into these camp phenoms, especially when we're like 3 days in. But that Marquise Bell that they brought in, the safety out of Florida A&M. I mean, my gosh, they cannot stop talking about him, and I think that'll be interesting to see how Quinn can come up with packages to get all these guys involved. I want to kind of do, can you see how I'm doing my fingers?
And
this is what
Bland, too, is another.
Yeah, Bland is the 5th round. This is what Quinn did the whole time he was talking to us. He was a teacher, and he made this sign. Can you see me, what I'm doing with my fingers?
Yeah, I see it.
He did that a whole lot. Anyway, that's going to be kind of in presentations. I'm going to start doing this.
What exactly were you doing? That's like in the shape of a C or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I just liked it.
But yeah, Marquise Bell is, he was an undrafted player that they gave the most guaranteed money to among any player that they didn't draft. So yeah, they have big plans for him. Talking to people around the team, they think that he's going to be in the mix for playing time right away. So it's not really just a question of will he make the team. It's we could actually see this guy playing for us, early in the season. And we don't want to overstate things because let's be honest, they just started in pads on Monday of this week. And while we were there, they're just in helmets and those guardian caps, of course, and shorts. So they weren't wearing pads. There was no contact. So it's awfully hard to evaluate a football player when there's no contact involved. And, they'll be moving in that direction from this point forward now as they not only have, padded practices during this week, but then next week they go to Denver and they have a joint practice and a preseason game with them. Then they go to the Chargers and have two joint practices and a preseason game with them. And then in the final preseason game against Seattle, we might see a little Dak Prescott.
Ooh, that'll be fun. It looks like the first 2 games pretty much has been confirmed by Mike McCarthy that we won't see Dak, but maybe in that 3rd game, those Guardians of the Galaxy helmets or the Guardian helmets, they gave us a chance for some fun, like Spaceballs references. I don't know if you remember that spoof of Star Wars, Rick Moranis, as a Mel Allen movie.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Those were funny. And then I liked Van Der Esch's description of that. He said they were a little bobbleheady. He said, I think they do feel a little heavier to them. But anything that cuts down on concussions or anything like that, I think that's fine. Although I saw one coach out there was sort of bemoaning. He thought
Robert Saleh.
That's
Robert
it.
Saleh,
Yeah.
the Jets. Yeah.
Yeah.
Former 49ers defensive coordinator was saying, well, because it protects their heads, these guys tend to use their heads, even more.
Yeah.
And the NFL, of course, the NFL's Dr. Sills, who's their medical expert, countered by noting that this is the time of year when they have the greatest incidence of concussions is in training camp, and that's why they're requiring, the linemen to wear these things, and they look odd, and I don't think the players love them, but they serve a very practical and important purpose.
The league has such a strong record on concussions. I tend to believe everything they say. All right, Ed. As we roll along here, let's listen.
I don't know why you can't get a credential sometimes.
That's right. I struggle in that area. Although I was credentialed every day out there. I had a great time. Love the PR staff. Thought they did a tremendous job out there. And I loved my credential every day said Doomsday. I was out there, for a few different publications, but Doomsday, what was on there. Now, speaking of that, on this next interview we're about to let you hear, Ed sees me doing the interview, and as happens sometimes, he's like, "Oh, Mosley's got somebody. I better go over there and we'll team up." And you'll hear me mention the radio station that I work for. So it went from sort of an ESPN Central Texas radio interview to it turned into a Doomsday thing when Ed showed up, and we had a little fun with it, and it was good. But first of all, Jaron Kearse, Ed. He had a great season last year. He's an imposing dude. I mean, that guy is big. And, same thing with Nashawn Wright. I had a talk with him the other day. Big. He added 14 pounds, by the way, and is now at 198, 6'4", 198. He was extremely skinny and thin coming out of Oregon State, but he's put on weight and that kind of thing. But, Ed, let's let our folks hear from Cowboys starting safety Jaron Kearse. Hey, Matt Mosley. This is Jaron Kearse joining me. Being back out here, getting started, I mean, how good a feeling is it? And do you love this environment as far as training with us?
It's a great feeling being back out here. Just being around my guys, getting some work in, just trying to get better every day. Taking it one day at a time with these guys and, just preparing to have a great season.
Trayvon Diggs made the statement yesterday, and he mentioned you in it, that he didn't feel like y'all got enough respect after the season you had last year. Do you have a similar feeling?
Yeah, I do have similar feelings, but, the good thing about it is, after that season ended, we have the opportunity for another season. So, we just go out there and put our best foot forward and do the same thing we did last year. And the respect will come. So, that's what I try to get the guys to understand, as well as myself, self-talk, and just understanding that, we have this opportunity again to go out and, prove the same thing.
Given the statistical success and the impact you guys had on the team in Dan Quinn's first year, leading the NFL in defensive touchdowns and takeaways, how do you duplicate or surpass that?
You just go out there and do the same things you've been doing. We go out there and we play our type of game. We don't go out and chase plays. We just let the plays come to us. Throughout the course of the season, those plays come, and it comes that way for every team. Some guys just make those plays and some guys don't. So it's just our job to make sure when the plays do come, we make those plays. And if we make those plays, we'll end up, it'll be the same thing to duplicate the same exact success we just had last year.
How much do you think you've changed your perception around the league with the season you had last year?
I think it's night and day, the perception of me. The perception of me, prior to last year was a special teams guy, a guy that can come in and play, never a guy that can be a full-time starter. So, to go out there and do what I did, I always knew I could do it. But the perception of me, I definitely feel like I've changed that perception. And, now my goal is to just go out there and do the same exact things, and try to, I guess, shake the perception that maybe I'm a one-year wonder. That's my goal now. So
how did Dan Quinn and his amazing mind on defense create that opportunity for you, or that platform for you to do what you did?
He just put us in positions to win. He puts us in great positions. He knows us as players. He knows us as persons, as people, and he just put us in great positions to go out there and succeed. At every level. And it's just our job to go out there and when he's putting us in that position, make the play when it comes our way.
By the way, Jaron, this is Ed Werder from ESPN fame. You probably recognize him who joined
see me
us.
out there a lot more than you see you out there, I'll tell you that.
We also do a podcast together, a Doomsday Podcast. One of the things about you, you became more and more like where they basically were running the defense through you and calling everything out. Like, how important was that to you, and how much was that a show of like big-time trust in you?
It's a testament to myself as far as just me being a smart player, me being a guy that can go in and facilitate and watch the film with guys and be able to point things out. And it's also a testament to Coach Quinn and the trust they had in me to go out there and do those things. I've always felt like I was a smart player, but a coach having the trust in me to give me the ability to go out there and show that is another thing.
The horn sounded. That means this has to come to an almost immediate. How much do you look forward to these matchups you have this year with like Tom Brady, Joe Burrow to start, Aaron Rodgers? Let's play some of the big time quarterbacks at the end.
I look forward to it tremendously. You get a chance to go pick those guys off and frame that ball up in your home. That's always a big deal. I got a Patty Mahomes ball. That I'm very proud of. I know in the future being able to tell my kids that I picked off Patrick Mahomes. It's gonna be great. And then like I said, the Aaron Rodgers, the Joe Burrows, the Toms. You don't get those. A lot of people don't have those balls, so I'm trying to be one of those guys to get one.
What's y'all's takeaway number, by the way? Do you have a number goal this season?
Anywhere 5 plus. 5 plus. That's my goal. And
okay.
As far as a team, sky's the limit. We don't have a goal. Sky's the limit.
Jaron Kearse, Doomsday Podcast, and ESPN Central Texas. All right, there he was. So just a sample of a couple of exclusives for the Doomsday Podcast. Jaron Kearse, and before that, of course, Dan Quinn. Now, Ed, we've hit on a few nuggets. I would say, and I was kind of looking over all my notes. Ed, do you believe I have notes? I actually do. I've got my pad out here. I've scrawled several things down. But I would say
is this for the radio show?
No, this is for us.
Okay.
Couple of things stood out to me. The one in particular, in some of the red zone work, there was an unbelievable catch made. So the catch of camp so far was made by none other than number 16, TJ Vasher, undrafted free agent out of Tech. He's actually was on, I think, the practice squad last year. Now, Ed, what's interesting about that is something Michael Gallup, it has to do. There's going to be some opportunities for young wide receivers to try to play their way into this lineup. They brought in a guy from the USFL, the MVP from the USFL, Cavante Turpin, who played at TCU. Tiny little guy, but fast.
Skinny-legged little guy.
What's that?
Quick, fast.
Oh, yeah.
He's a skinny-legged guy.
Yeah.
I mean, people talk about, Tyreek Hill is only 5'9", and he's the most explosive receiver in football, but Tyreek Hill's a thick-bodied guy, and the player that the Cowboys signed is nothing at all built like that. That's not to say he can't play. I mean, Rondale Moore in Arizona is a very slightly built player, quick, fast. So I think the Cowboys look at him as a guy that, Mike McCarthy said he has Tony Pollard traits, and talking to Kellen Moore briefly about him, because this is the only player that he dwarfs, so to speak. I know Mike McCarthy got in trouble for saying midget, or Jerry Jones got in trouble for saying midget at training camp, so I hope dwarf doesn't get me in trouble. But Kellen Moore actually dwarfs this new receiver that they brought in. But he said, hey, we get this guy in space, man. He is quick. He is lightning. So who knows? Maybe this guy makes an impact.
Kellen Moore wakes up every day like, who can run a jet sweep for me? And, I think they tried Jordan Lewis at one point, and now it's like, got my guy, Cavante Turpin. Now, all this sort of goes along, Ed, with the news we got after visiting with Michael Gallup in one of those early days of training camp, and you were right in the middle of that conversation with Gallup and quickly got to the heart of the matter, which was, do you think you're going to be ready week one? And Ed, I'll let you speak to it because you heard him exactly what he said, but it does not seem like he's that optimistic that he'll be ready to go at least week one of the regular season.
He tore his ACL late in the year, waited until February to have the surgery. And, Mike McCarthy said he's entering the fourth quarter of his rehab and recovery. So I asked Michael Gallup if it was a reasonable possibility that he would be available to play against the Bucs week one. And he said, no, it will not be a reasonable possibility. And I've since, in talking to people, come to the conclusion that this is going to be a really difficult call for the Cowboys. He's on PUP now, physically unable to perform, so he can't practice, which they can remove that designation at any time in the preseason. But if they put him on physically unable to perform as part of the regular, when they make the regular roster, then that means he's out for a minimum of 4 games. And so the Cowboys think it's going to be close as to whether he's ready, earlier than game 4, or it'll be after that. If they conclude it'll be after that, obviously they'd like to have the roster spot for somebody else. But if he's going to miss 2 weeks, then they're probably willing to carry him on the roster and go short and have him available to play, in week 3. But it's going to be close. I mean, he said he hasn't had any setbacks, but he also said, they wouldn't even let me walk in my cleats until we got out here. So he's just now been cleared to wear cleats. He was having to wear, flat-soled shoes all the time just to reduce the risk of, any further damage to his ACL or MCL. So I think it's going to be, I think it could be a couple of weeks that he misses. Either way, I mean, we talk about Dak Prescott and enormous pressure on him. I mean, he just turned 29. He's going into his 7th season. Roger Staubach won his first Super Bowl much earlier in his career, even though he was older because of the Navy thing. Troy Aikman won his first 3 Super Bowls earlier in his career than Dak is now. He won it in his 4th year. But I think it's going to be a real challenge for Dak early in the season with Amari Cooper traded and Michael Gallup not available. He had those 2 plus CeeDee Lamb, last year. So I think the passing game is going to be challenged, and that's why they're looking for explosive plays. Mike McCarthy talked about it the other day. Hey, this game's all about explosive plays, and you can't win consistently if you don't get explosive plays. And so, that's why they're talking about getting Tony Pollard the ball as a receiver to make up for some of the receptions they lose without Amari Cooper. And it's why they talk about maybe this Turpin kid being a factor in a limited kind of role offensively to make some big plays. That was interesting in talking to CeeDee Lamb the other day, that he said they found out just in a receiver meeting that even him going into his 3rd season with the Cowboys, that he's still the youngest wide receiver in that wide receiver room. I mean, that's amazing, kind of wild. And it sounds so crazy to me, but it certainly, even some of this rookie that's come in, who is that? Tolbert. Is the same age. Tolbert. Yeah, 23 years old as CeeDee Lamb. So I was trying to. CeeDee's born later in the year, so he's technically younger. And after practice, it was interesting to watch some Dak doing some red zone throws after practice, and CeeDee Lamb and Jalen Tolbert were the 2 guys that he was involved with. So obviously they need Tolbert to win a role and be effective this preseason. And I they're sitting there with $20 million under the cap, which is unusual, but the Cowboys actually usually budget like $15 million per season, to fund their 16-man practice squad and to accommodate, promoting guys off the practice squad into regular season games. They have to pay them a higher salary then. So they budget about $15 million of that $20 million for those kind of purposes just to get through the season. And so there's not as much money to go out and, sign a free agent receiver if they decide that Tolbert's not developing as quickly, or they have an injury at the position and they become exposed as, too thin. We've seen what happens when Dak doesn't have quality receivers. They tried that not too long ago. And that's why they had to go trade a first-round pick for Amari Cooper to create offense and to win a division title. But we'll see how it all works out. But, DK Metcalf has now signed a long-term deal with Seattle. Deebo Samuel has now signed a long-term extension with the 49ers. So those two players are not going on the market anytime soon. There's still a guy like T.Y. Hilton or Emmanuel Sanders, veteran players who have been productive, who maybe the Cowboys could get involved with if they deem that necessary.
Yeah, and I do find it interesting that Jerry made such a big thing of availability, and he's certainly targeting Amari for missing those games because of not being vaccinated and all of that. But Michael Gallup, their number,
and Leo Collins,
correct?
Leo Collins too,
yeah.
Same thing, and Randy Gregory, same thing.
Yeah, but
Michael Gallup.
The point I'm making about Gallup is that he's not going to be available perhaps till after week 4. So it's just interesting to make such a huge thing.
And beyond that, Amari Cooper, $20 million. Well, the Cowboys have that under the cap. Although I just explained, why that might be something of an illusion. Amari Cooper was one of the highest paid receivers in football when this offseason began, and they didn't want to carry $20 million for a receiver, so they traded him for a 5th-round pick to the Browns. And now Amari Cooper, I think there have been 7 or 8 receiver deals that exceed $20 million. So he's barely even a top 10 paid receiver now. So I'm not sure that the Cowboys gauged the market quite right, or more likely than not, they just had some issues with Amari Cooper that they couldn't get past. And they just felt like he's not going to be worth $20 million based on what we've seen, in their minds over the past few years.
Let's just keep
in terms of sustained productivity.
Let's keep our eye on Deron Bland from Fresno State, who you mentioned earlier, the cornerback, because that may be the pick. That's the 5th-round pick that they got for Cooper.
That's who they traded Cooper for.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll watch his career. Now, Ed, I feel like you got some special one-on-one time perhaps with the quarterback the other day. Anything that you gleaned from that conversation that you could share with us, or anything? I mean, I'll just say this: after watching Dak for a few days, there were some scramble drills. He did move. I thought he looked pretty good. I mean, I thought as far as like quickness and getting away from rushers and that kind of thing, I thought he looked pretty nimble. But I know you had a chance to visit with him for a minute.
Yeah, we did. He did an ESPN ABC interview for me on Saturday, and he agrees that he feels different athletically. He had said in minicamp he was in the best shape of his career. He's leaner. I don't think there's any question, given how far removed he is now from the compound leg and ankle fractures that he suffered in 2020 that ended his season in week 5, that he feels different athletically in terms of his ability to move. Mike McCarthy's talked about putting more movement type of plays in for the quarterback to not only extend plays, but by design to get him outside the pocket and to use his mobility more in the running game. And I asked Dak about that. I said, you came into the league before you were a $40 million investment, and before, you suffered, this season-ending injury, the first major injury of your NFL career, you were one of the premier dual threat quarterbacks in football. Do you see yourself getting back to that? And he suggested that that's not likely anymore, that he's now recognized that it's too risky. He used to talk about, hey, I love to play a physical style at the quarterback position. It motivates and inspires my teammates, gets us in the game in a different way, makes us feel, invincible, and that we can punish people and dominate. So I don't think he's going to do it like that anymore. But in certain situations where he thinks the risk is justified by the reward in that situation, I think he will maybe be more willing to take off in situations where even last year he didn't. Well, I think you're right, and I think it's going to be that's good. That could give the Cowboys something. I was looking for, as you were talking there, a quote from Jerry. Jerry has been, he's been all over the place. I know he was
on the NFL Network saying some things. He's bullish right now, Ed, and sometimes you wonder if it's almost a little too much. He's quoted saying of Mike McCarthy, if Mike McCarthy weren't the man that gives us the best chance to win it all this year, he would not be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. I can assure you of that. He's the best man for the job. Sometimes you can say it so much, you're like, oh my gosh, okay. And so this is going to continue to get asked. He's going to continue to go this direction. But Ed, considering Zeke, he's in this is a huge season for him. 2 new starters. Yes. 2 new starters on the O-line. Receiving core inexperienced and in question. They're going to have to lean on this defense more than ever. So they can say they want, Mike McCarthy's the man, all they want, but who has to at least kind of hold this thing together, and I think Jerry recognized this in something I read today, is the defense. And so in a sense they can brag on Mike all they want, but I think they're counting on Dan Quinn to really hold the fort.
Right. I see them. I don't think they're going to go back to, the Jason Garrett approach of 2016 when Zeke was a fourth overall pick and Dak was a rookie starter who could run, and they really tried to let Dak manage the game. McCarthy said it the other day. His philosophy is, I do everything I can offensively to make the quarterback successful. This is Dak Prescott's offense. So we've heard like Tony Romo suggest they're going to go back to the way they played in 2016. I think that's probably an exaggeration. I think they recognize that they need to be more effective running the ball, and that Dak is really good in the play action game, the play action component of playing quarterback more than he is a drop back passer. And so I think they do want to emphasize the running game. I thought it was interesting that Jerry's been talking this weekend about hey, Zeke Elliott needs to be our featured runner. I think most people would say you need to get Tony Pollard the ball even more than he is now. Like last year it was a 60-40 split. Even though Zeke was not effective and was playing through this, knee injury that he never fully disclosed how serious it was, a partially torn PCL in week 4. He played hurt, and I know that what they think of him for the way he played hurt. And especially when you talk about, look at what they did with Randy Gregory, look at what they did with Leo Collins, look what they did with Amari Cooper. It was because of that. They love Ezekiel Elliott and his commitment to playing through pain. Most guys might not have done it, but you also have to look at it like, well, who's going to win us the game? I know I've got this huge investment in Ezekiel Elliott, and I got a big decision to make after this season because Elliott's out of guaranteed money after this year. Tony Pollard's going out of contract. He's gonna get to become an unrestricted free agent for the first time in his career. He's going out of his rookie contract. They have a huge decision to make at that position when the season's over. Even though they love Elliott and they think he's worth the money, it could be Zeke has to justify his salary. He has the highest cap hit of any running back in football this year. He's got to justify that at the end of the year for his career to continue here, in my mind. And he might. But I don't think they're going back to 2016 and that style of Jason Garrett offense. But I do think they want to be more effective running the ball, and they want to give the offensive linemen a better chance to do more than just pass protect all the time. To your point, Jerry said of Zeke, he has to be our featured back, and he is our featured back. We can feature him in a lot of different ways. It's critical that we make Zeke really the focus of what we're doing. I agree with you. In some sense, it's like Tony's saying it, Jerry's saying it. They're almost trying to send messages to Mike, make this about Zeke, and that's not in this coach's DNA. That's not who he is, and that's not really what he's done all his career at Green Bay, and I don't know if that's what's going to help the Cowboys the most. So, in 13 years in Green Bay, Mike McCarthy's Packers never finished in the top 10 in rushing attempts. Never. Now he had Aaron Rodgers, but now he has Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott's not Aaron Rodgers, but Mike McCarthy loves Dak Prescott. there's no question that he loves Dak Prescott. And my belief was always that, we all wonder how it got screwed up in the front office and why did the Cowboys give in to Ezekiel Elliott? And as a result, they lost Amari Cooper because, he got the free agency. They had to pick between, they could only franchise tag either he or Dak. Then they wind up paying Dak way more than they would have had to. And they paid Amari more than they would have had to because he got an offer from Washington. And ultimately they paid him so much they couldn't afford him anymore. So the reason they did it, in my mind, was, Jason Garrett had been told, hey, you got to win this year or we're going to have to make a coaching change. And Zeke was holding out, and he went to Jerry and said, hey, look, I can't be put in this position and not have a chance to win without my best player. Like, if you're going to do this to me, give me my best player. And so they got him signed right before week 1, and that's why that happened. And like Mike McCarthy, I think if it would have been the next year, if Zeke hadn't gotten signed when he did, this holdout would have failed. I don't think I think when McCarthy got here, there would have been so much less emphasis on that kind of runner in his offense that they probably wouldn't have even signed Zeke to an extension.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's one of the worst. It appears to be one of the worst blunders that Jerry Jones has had in the past decade on that contract. But at the same time, this guy seems to be a huge leader. He goes to the quarterback meetings, and Mark McCarthy calls him a keystone player and one of the rocks, quote, rocks of the team. And it really comes back to an old adage, what if your like greatest leaders or the person apparently everybody looks to is not one of your best players? Can you succeed that way? And we will see. I think here's the way I see the leadership on this team right now. Dak, number one. I noticed just being around Zach Martin, that guy's kind of come into some sort of a huge veteran. When I hear him talk, it reminds me of some old like Jason Witten type stuff. Like he certainly feels very comfortable in a leadership role. So the two of them. But then Zeke, I think a lot of people look to Zeke, and then I think if you're going to go over the defensive side of the ball, I guess you would say DeMarcus Lawrence would be the maybe the top leader on that side of the ball.
Problem is he's another guy who's been hurt and isn't out there every week, and so I could definitely see like Micah Parsons, taking a bigger role in that regard as he develops a sense of. He says he's not trying to prove himself to everybody in the league anymore or his own teammates. This year now it's about domination. I think he'll become a bigger leader on that team. I think Curse is a leader on that team on the defense. So, and I think Dan Quinn's the leader of the defense. Like these guys play their tails off for Dan Quinn. And that's another part of what appeals so much to Jerry and Steven when they look at, well, if we make a coaching change, what direction would we go? Would we want to pay the Saints what it's going to take to compensate them for Sean Payton, who's under contract to the Saints, even though he's not coaching there anymore? Would we be willing to pay Sean Payton at the top of the coaching scale? Or would we just rather move to Dan Quinn, who has a relationship with, half the players in our building already and has kind of demonstrated his abilities as a coordinator on the defensive side? And, don't forget, he did go to a Super Bowl as a head coach.
Yeah. He absolutely did. And
guess what? He took over from McCarthy in New Orleans last year when he tested positive for COVID, missed a week. He went 1-0 last year, Dan Quinn did as a head coach.
Yeah. Yeah, it's set up for it's going to be fascinating to watch how it all comes out. But right now, the defense needs to be what it was last year, and last year was sort of a record-breaking, crazy amount. Now, talking to Trayvon Diggs, they think they can do something similar, and Trayvon Diggs does not think they got enough love. Obviously, personally, he got a lot of attention, but he thinks they didn't get the respect they deserved, and he's talking about Anthony Brown, Jordan Lewis, the rest of the secondary. And I think with Curse and Malik Hooker and Donovan Wilson, Quinn, and that was one of the things that came up with us, Ed, I think he thinks he's got a lot of parts to work with.
Yeah. I thought one of the interesting things he said, I don't know if he said it in these exact words, but he basically said one of the reasons he came back was that if I had never been a head coach, I probably would have taken one of those jobs, whichever one I wanted, the most that I got offered. I just have taken it. But I was so dispirited when I got fired. And Dante Fowler's in Cowboys camp, and he played for Quinn on those teams, and he talked about how he felt bad for Quinn, that he felt like the team quit on him, which is almost unimaginable given how he inspires these guys, that anybody would ever have quit on him. Now, they did play hard, at the end of one year to save his job, and then he got fired early in the next year after the watermelon kick game against the Cowboys, by the way. I think it was a week after that. But, yeah, I think the thing that was interesting that he said was, he recaptured his love of football and coaching in Dallas. And, I know what I have on defense, and I didn't want to let somebody else win with this, what I've put together here. Like, I want to win with this. I don't want somebody else to come in here and be the beneficiary of this. I want to win with this.
Yeah, I think that should be one of the headliners of this podcast. That line right there. I really liked it.
There's a lot of good ones, though.
Yeah.
What he said about Micah Parsons was great. What he said about Diggs playing on offense was great.
Yeah. There's
a lot.
I think we can release that tomorrow that Trayvon Diggs will be the number 2 wide receiver on this team. Hey, Ed, here's that quote. I wanted to read this quote to you because this one really grabbed my attention from Jerry, and I think you were flying home, but you've probably seen this. He said they're talking about the defense having more speed than just Micah Parsons. He said, now talking about, and this is Jerry talking about Micah. Now he's the quicker, but I'm seeing other quickness out there. I'm lifted by our ambition, which is to maybe have a defense that does more of the job than we're expecting from the offense. And I really can see it. That's an interesting quote. So they're
going to run the football and play defense, and they're paying their quarterback $40 million.
Yes.
Hey, if it works, I think Dak would go along with it. Like, I think Dak will do whatever to win. I really do. I don't think Dak would have a problem with, throwing 25 passes a game if they could win all their games, or if that would get them to a Super Bowl. I think he'd gladly do it. I mean, Aikman did that. Yeah, it was a different time and a different game, but there's no question Aikman could have dominated the passing stats. He could have thrown the ball like Marino. Had he been given the opportunity, or if he thought that's what would win. But he accepted his role, and because winning with the offensive line and winning with the defense and winning with the running game created success for everyone, and they won 3 Super Bowls in 4 years. So, yeah, I certainly think Dak has that same personality, and that winning is the most important thing to him, and he'd do whatever he had to do, adjust in whatever way necessary to win.
Yeah, I agree. Dak's one of the most amazing stories in NFL history. He used a dislocated, horrible ankle injury to create ultimate leverage, and then became one of the highest paid quarterbacks ever.
It should have been the worst thing that could possibly happen to a franchise quarterback, suffering a season-ending injury, the first of their career, early in a franchise tag year, and he still got a record contract.
It was unbelievable.
That's how badly that whole thing was handled from a management point of view. And that's how important Dak demonstrated he was in his absence.
All right, Ed, tremendous stuff. I'm excited. I think you're going to be perhaps involved in some of those practices, or the practice they have out there in Denver. That's part of the country you know well and you love. And so that'll be exciting. We may have to try to get a little Doomsday involvement in that. I don't know if I'll be able to make that trip. I may try. Who knows? I may show up out there. How far is your place? We won't tell people exactly where you live out there, but how far is your vacation home from the
15 minutes? Hour and 15 minutes from the Broncos facility, and about an hour or a little less from the stadium.
Okay, good. Well, that should work. That will work for me if y'all have an extra bedroom.
You're not waiting for me to invite you to stay there. Okay.
No, holler down to Jill if you would right now and ask her if I could come with you guys. Ed, we had a great time out there. It
was fun.
Appreciate the Cowboys, their hospitality. It was good to see all our buddies. We ate out with some friends. I tried a different hotel that was disastrous. We both did TV. Ed did a lot more lives than I did, but I did do some Fox. Ed, obviously, on ESPN, so appreciate Colin Cowherd and all his people. But it is the Doomsday Podcast. Ed, say goodnight.
Good night, everybody. We'll talk to you from Denver.
For Ed Werder, I'm Matt Mosley. That was the Doomsday Podcast. See you soon.
You haven't heard about the McCrispy yet? Well, then, you probably haven't heard the sweet silence after the first crispy bite either. Go try it for yourself to hear the best nut sound you've ever heard.
Walmart Plus members save on meeting up with friends. Save on having them over for dinner with free delivery with no hidden fees or markups. That's groceries, plus napkins, plus that vegetable chopper to make things a bit easier. Plus, members save on gas to go meet them in their neck of the woods. Plus, when you're ready for the ultimate sign of friendship, start a show together with your included Paramount Plus subscription. Walmart Plus members save on this plus so much more. Start a 30-day free trial at walmartplus.com. Paramount Plus Essential Plan only. Separate registration required. See Walmart Plus terms and conditions.